Hi everyone. Today what I'd like to focus on is these big questions on how to quote and paraphrase effectively. We've talked about, how to find quality sources, how to weed out the junk from the gold, how to organize those sources as you're kind of outlining and getting into the pre-writing. But now we need to figure out, well, what do I do when it actually comes to quoting or paraphrasing that material and make sure that I'm doing it well and that it's not damaging my paper in any way, but always helping my paper. So I'm just going to run through some ideas that you can keep in the back of your mind as you begin drafting your research-based papers. So the first question up here that I think everybody should ask: am I accidentally plagiarizing? Everyone knows not to plagiarize, right? But sometimes it happens accidentally, I've noticed, with students, and they don't even know they're doing it. So accidental plagiarism, what is this? So as I put up here, it's especially common when students paraphrase one of their sources without properly citing. So remember, paraphrase, I'm pulling out a part of that paper, that research paper, or that website material, but I'm not directly quoting it. I'm putting it in my own words. Well, even though I'm doing that and I don't have quotation marks around that material, I still need to show readers that those ideas are not original to me. They came from a specific source, and just as I would with a direct quote, I'm going to cite that material, even though there are no quotation marks around it. So rule number one, I think this is a good rule to keep in your back pocket, throughout your college career, is to never assume your readers know what ideas came from you and what ideas came from your sources. Sometimes that's easy to forget when you're really deep into the writing and you know that that material came from a source and is not original to you, but we need to make sure our readers know that as well, and the way to do that is to indicate that with your citation. So you can also, when you're aside from the citation, when you're paraphrasing, you can give your readers a heads up with signal phrases. So I put a couple here. You've used them, I'm sure, but they're a good thing to keep in mind, where you don't want to just kind of dump your paraphrase moment in or your quote. Introduce it with a statement like, according to X, the writer's last name, or the writer states that, and then you can flow on from there with the direct quote or the paraphrase material and also your citation. But what you're doing is you're getting yourself out of that plagiarism trouble. You're showing your readers exactly where those ideas came from, and you're sending the message to them that, hey, this is not original to me. This came from a source that I'm using, and even though it's not a direct quote, it's a paraphrase, I'm going to show you with my citation, with my signal phrase, that where that source material came from. So always a good first question to keep in mind when it comes to using those quotes and paraphrase material. Question number two, does it need to be there? I think it's so tempting, right, when we find a lot of good material to move all that material into our papers, but the risk we run when doing so is pretty soon our quoted material, our paraphrase material, all that outside information begins to overtake our work, and we no longer remain the dominant voice inside of it. We're kind of hiding in the background. So I put some questions up here. The first one, to weed it out. Right? When you're going through your drafts and you're trying to make your draft stronger, do I really need this quote or this paraphrase section in my work? Is it actually helping? Is it making the work stronger? Or am I just kind of doing it? It seems like I'm just checking a box and this seemed like a good idea. Put a quote in here, put a paraphrase moment in here. Or is it helping my paper? So do I really need it? The second one I put up here, what is this quote or this paraphrase material adding to my work? Can you explain that to yourself? Because if you can't, guess what? Your readers aren't going to understand why you used it either. It might just seem, again, kind of like an empty gesture. Yeah, I found a quote, I found a paraphrase material. It's somewhat related to the topic. It's somewhat related to this body paragraph material, but it doesn't really need to be there, maybe. Is it actually adding something to my work? What is it adding to my work? And if you can't define that quickly and easily, chances are that material probably doesn't need to be there. And then the third one, now we're getting down into the real kind of nitty-gritty of it. Can I ditch some of this, or can I condense some of it? So if so, let's say I have a big block quote, or I have a big area of my paper where I paraphrase some important parts of a source. Well, if it's too much, what are the most essential parts of the quote or the paraphrase that I need to keep? Again, let's put it on a diet, let's condense it, and make sure we only are including the most important sections of that quote or that paraphrase material, because we don't want it to overtake our work. So those are good questions to keep in mind. Question number 3, am I the dominant voice in my paper? One thing I always tell student writers is that, a paper, research-based paper that you'll likely write as you continue on is into your research career as a college writer, you're building that house from the ground up, right? You're building the foundation, you're building each room, and you want to make sure people know that it's your house. And you have to be very selective in who you allow that into that house as far as outside sources go, but you also have to make sure that you remain the owner, quote unquote, of that paper. You're the dominant voice. So the first thing I put up here, if you're over quoting or you're over paraphrasing sections, is you make your readers think you don't understand your topic and need to hide behind your research, right? I don't know enough about this topic, so I'm going to let my sources kind of do my bidding for me. I'm just going to keep kind of, boom, another quote, another paraphrase material, keep that going all the way into the end. Well, pretty soon I disappear from the paper and my readers will notice that. I'm also sending a number 2 I put here is to make the readers think you don't have original ideas of your own. Need to make sure that readers know where you stand in this conversation, that you're presenting that stance in an interesting, original way, and that you're, using your research to inform your ideas, but you're not letting that research overtake your paper and hiding behind that research. And the third one related, it drowns out your writing voice and forces you into the background of your work when you have too many quotes, when you have too much paraphrase material. I have a little trick here that you might want to try out is once you have a solid draft done, you might want to try highlighting every moment. And this can go either way. If you're old school and you like to print out your work with a real highlighter and actually highlight every single moment you quote, every single moment that you have a paraphrase section, it can also be on your screen too. But once you get those highlighted moments up on the screen or on the page and you zoom out, I think it's much easier to ask, am I the dominant voice in this paper, or is there a lot of yellow highlighted areas and I'm pretty much just sneaking in here and there? I really don't exist in this paper. Well, that doesn't mean that the paper's doomed. It's just a good part in the process to ask, well, how can I slim some of this stuff down, remove some of it so that I can open up more space for my own writing voice? So yeah, definitely I would give that a shot. The highlighting trick is sometimes really helpful once you get that draft down to kind of weed out the stuff you don't need. Here we are now with question number 4. Am I explaining my quotes and paraphrases? So now as a writer, I've been very selective and good about only using the most important parts of my quotes, the most important parts of my sources, and I'm not doing it too often that it's overtaking. But now I have to ask, am I explaining those sections? So the first question I put up here, am I just dropping this quote in or this paraphrase in and then running away? If so, I need to slow down and hold my readers by the hand and really show them what's meaningful about this quote, what's meaningful about this paraphrase moment. In other words, why did I bring it into my paper, and what do I want my readers to take away from it? So really do some hand holding and don't rush off from that quote. Make sure that you explain it. Explain the importance of it. The second point I put up here is, what do you want your readers to learn from the quoted paraphrase material? Again, don't assume that just because you use that quote, readers will necessarily understand what you want them to take away from it. It comes back to that hand-holding you have to do as an academic writer to really, really kind of squeeze that quote. Show them, hey, this is what I want you to learn. This is what's significant about this quote or this paraphrase. This is why I included it in my paper. And then the third step under here, third question, are you spending enough time analyzing and responding to the outside material? You may be doing this here and there in your work, but you also might find as the work gets cold and you come back with a fresh set of eyes that there are certain sections you're still running away a little too quickly. And we want to slow down in those sections. Okay, I explained, what I wanted them to get from it, maybe in a line or two, but I really need to slow down here because it's not clear enough yet what's significant about this quote, what I'm trying to get them to learn from it or to take away from it. And then the fourth one, I think this is just something I remember as a student writer. I would always have my favorite sources to use in a certain paper. And I'd find, after reading drafts that sometimes I'd be spending too much time with one or maybe two sources while ignoring all the others. So that's another good thing to look at once you have a draft down. Are you relying too heavily and leaning too heavily against one or two sources, or are you using those sources in a balanced way, all of your sources? Another good thing to look at, in those early stages when you have a draft up and you can kind of see your paper take shape. Good question to ask there. I think that's all I had. Yep. So those are the, four questions I really want you to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're thinking about all that quoted and paraphrased material and how you're using it, and to make sure that you're doing it in a really smart way that will benefit your paper. As always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions.